Fight me. So Derek Green basically made it known that he no longer wants to be at Oklahoma. He's going to leave the program. If he hasn't already, this is a 3-star recruit out of North Carolina. This was a guy that had signed with this class after being recruited by Ruffin McNeil to play defensive tackle. He's also the only prototypical defensive tackle in the 2019 class. Now, there's lots of defensive ends in that class, and I'm sure a lot of those dudes are going to move over and play defensive tackle, like, for instance, Corey Roberson. He gets back healthy. But this is not a good look for Oklahoma. It's not a good look because you got Ron Tatum going into the transfer portal for whatever reason, and now you've got Derek Green joining the Navy. At least that's what he plans to do today, right? So as a part of all of this, you got 2 defensive linemen who have left the program in 2 months after you getting a new defensive coordinator on campus and saying we're going to be faster at our defensive line positions, which means that a lot of those dudes ain't necessarily built for it. And now that we know that Michael Thompson ain't necessarily playing defensive tackle, and that was a 4-star Army All-American, you have to wonder who is playing defensive tackle now. Now you have some options, right? You have Troy James, you got Dylan Fa'amata, you've got Neville Gallimore, but you're also going to need to get some help from guys like Jordan Kelly. A lot of folks want to know what's going on with Arthur McGinnis, a guy that was outside linebacker, all of a sudden has moved to defensive end and or defensive tackle, depending on who you want to talk to, but hasn't been really seen since the FAU game last season. You're also talking about guys that might not necessarily have been prototypical defensive tackles that would have been defensive ends moving inside, but we'll have to wait and see because nobody's actually seen Alex Grinch's defense, which is that's kind of exciting, right? Because you don't know what it's going to look like. You see a 3-4 scheme, yeah, all right, but you also see one gap scheme, which basically is a 4-3 to me, right? Or 3-3-5, or ability to be multiple, and you know that he wants takeaways. This is a defense that only had 11 turnovers in 2018, and they're looking to get 24 in 2019. That is going to be an enormous jump, but for me, where you're going to miss a guy like Derek Green, where you're going to miss a guy like Ron Tatum, is on 3rd and short, particularly just 3rd down conversions in general. Oklahoma ranked number 118th in 3rd down defense in 2018, and they didn't look real good at it against Texas in the Big 12 title game, and certainly not against Alabama in the Orange Bowl, and it became sort of a joke that Oklahoma would give up conversions on 3rd down, and 3rd and short was almost a gimme for many offenses from Kansas State all the way to Alabama because you did not have the beef up front to get off of blocks and make plays. Now, a lot of that, I think, is scheme. A lot of that is asking a guy like Neville Gallimore to be Jordan Phillips. And for those that are paying attention, Jordan Phillips is the highest draftee in the NFL draft that Mike Stoops has put out in defensive line a very long time. So you got to go back a while, is what I'm saying. You got to go back to 2015 when Jordan Phillips, I believe, went 52nd overall in the 2nd round as in defensive tackle. And he played the nose, and that was the reason why that defense worked, and you could have Stryker being a holy terror on the outside. But you haven't had that guy since Jordan Phillips left, and that was a guy that a lot of folks made a lot of fun of because he was slow to get to where he was going. But once he figured out how to play the nose, zero technique, there was no stopping that guy. And we've been looking for that guy at Oklahoma for a long time. Devontae Lampkin was supposed to be that guy. Charles Walker was supposed to be that guy. Neville Gallimore was supposed to have been that guy, and for his part, he had 16 tackles for loss last year, 3 sacks, right? 50 total tackles, which is way more than I want my defensive tackle to get. But again, part of his job was holding up 2 and 3 guys at a time, if at all possible, to let guys like Ronnie Perkins, Mark Jackson try to get to the quarterback while Kenneth Mann tried to do what he could. So I'm really interested to see how all of this shakes out. Now, in the interim, does Oklahoma get that scholarship back? Yes, they will, right? Whether the kid transfers or joins the Navy, and I think he's going to join the Navy, and I really support that decision. But you're also going to look in the grad transfer market, and there's a couple guys that they can go get. Check OUinsider.com, where I and Brandon Drum will have more to say about that. But again, you got to wonder what the defensive line is going to look like, number one, and what your depth is going to look like, because you haven't got a lot out of those guys we call defensive tackles. And OU fans would be right to be more than a little pissed about the development of the defensive tackles, because as good as OU has been at developing quarterbacks, at landing transfer quarterbacks, at getting great transfer play on the offensive side of the ball, dating back to Justin Brown, right? Remember him. You can't say that about the defense. Like, that's a glaring mistake and or instance where I felt like Oklahoma should have done something. Now, they had an opportunity last year, right? That one missed them. They thought they got a guy. That guy ends up at Georgia. It happens. But you can't really talk about a guy not having been here being something that could be a game changer. So I'm asking, when is it that Oklahoma could go out and get a dominant defensive grad transfer? What would that look like? Because are there really that many guys that are dominant defensive grad transfers out there? Yeah, they are. Bubba Bolden, that guy, well, grad transfer, excuse me, that's a transfer. Grad transfers out there, we're talking about what? I'm struggling to think of a great defensive grad transfer. And I think I know why, too. It's because when you're identified as a great defensive player early, you go into the NFL draft because that is the commodity, right? We can find offensive players. We can find kids that can transfer. But even while we're talking about defensive grad transfers, what about transfers? What would have stopped Oklahoma from trying to go get Bubba Bolden from USC, guy that just popped in my head a few minutes ago? Or Jalen Phillips out of UCLA, who I know had a tie to Roy Manning and played for him out there at UCLA and was number one recruit in the country at one point. There were dudes out there to go get, and whether it's because of your coordinator search situation taking precedent, which is cool, and I get that, or because you just didn't feel like you needed to do that because you had this pretty good 2019 class you felt good about, doesn't really matter to me. What matters is that you're not necessarily getting the production that you want to get. And while you have told everybody that the defense is going to be different, you also ran off a couple kids for reasons that might have something to do with the football program and reasons that might not. Point is, bodies are bodies, and you ain't got none.